Nick, what was your reaction to yesterday's news about Bill O'Brien?
All right, let me say this on the front end. I think Bill O'Brien's a good person. I think that I was in Houston when he was hired. I think he's done great stuff in the community. I do think his players like him. And I think that sometimes the commentary makes it seem like I dislike him as a person. I don't. And so let me say that before I do this thing I have to do here. This was such a long time coming. Bill O'Brien had two jobs, the head coach and the general manager, and he was terrible at both of them. And the timeline of Bill O'Brien's reign of terror in Houston goes like this. In year 2, he has Ryan Fitzpatrick on his roster. He trades him to Brandon's New York Jets so he can start Brian Hoyer.
Thank you.
He ended up, yeah, no problem. He ended up benching Brian Hoyer in game 1 for Ryan Mallett. He would do that again later. Year 2, he gives Brock Osweiler $72 million sight unseen without meeting him. Osweiler gets benched during the season for Tom Savage. In year 4, they have Deshaun Watson. He starts Tom Savage over Deshaun Watson in week 1 and then benches Savage at halftime of that game. That was the second time in 3 years his opening day starter didn't make it out of week 1, and it wasn't because of injury. And by the way, that year he traded Dwayne Brown, their left tackle, which started a whole domino effect of disasters for them. Year 5, they get a new GM, Brian Gaine. He lasts 17 months because Bill O'Brien helps bring in the former Patriots team chaplain, Jack Easterby, who then ousts Brian Gaine, and Bill O'Brien then has even more control. Year 6, they traded Jadeveon Clowney and $7 million for a third-round pick, and they traded 2 firsts and a second for Laramie Tunsil without signing him to a contract. Near the end of that season, he cursed out a fan while walking out of a home game. Year 7, trades DeAndre Hopkins for a second-round pick and David Johnson. He pays Laramie Tunsil way over market, pays Randall Cobb way over market, and oh yeah, by the way, was up 24-0 in a playoff game last year and then didn't even have the lead at halftime. I say all that to say this. This was terrible. And he leaves the Texans with Deshaun Watson, but no draft capital. They have the most expensive roster in the league, and they're 0-4. They're in the same position the Jets and the Giants and the Falcons find themselves in. And so sorry, I was thinking Brian Gaine. So Brandon, this is long overdue, and I think the Texans will be far better because of it.
I mean, that's the segment right there. You did a great job of laying out the why. I mean, you started with Coach Billy O. I mean, he's a good coach, but he's a terrible GM. Look at the coach side, 62-48 over the, 6 full seasons, 4 playoff trips, 2 playoff wins. He's a good coach. And when you look at this year, he's had the hardest start in the last 50 years in the National Football League.
Right.
But when you go to the other side, that's the why. That's why he got canned. Because he's a terrible GM. I called some people close to the organization last night, and I was like, all right, this is what I'm thinking. Am I close? And they said, absolutely. And I start talking about the moves he made that you just laid out, Nick. But they went farther, and they said, well, and I didn't even think about Dwayne Brown, but you look at Clowney. There was people in the organization that thought that they could get that deal done, and he didn't get it done. So they were split there, and they didn't like how that was handled. Then you fast forward to the Tunsil deal. And then the thing that made this interesting and pretty much problematic is that there wasn't an extension worked out during the trade.
Yep.
Think about that. You know, when you make that trade and you say, we're giving up 2 first-rounders for this guy, you know he's there for the long haul. So you have to have that extension in place, because the result of not getting it done is you overpaying this guy. He's making $20-something million a year, which is, at the time, was $4 million more than the highest paid tackle in the game. That's an issue. Yep. And then you go to DeAndre Hopkins, and there's just no value there. You give up a future Hall of Famer, you get no value in return, and he's also balling. Yep. So when you look at the makeup of Billy O, he is a fiery guy, and you're losing, and then you got J.J. Watt putting his stamp on it saying something has to change. That's why things changed.
Okay, so, Nick, he did all of those moves, and those weren't universally heralded. There's been fire Bill O'Brien signs in the stands since there was fans in the stands a few years ago. We knew about this DeAndre Hopkins trade, and it was universally canned in March. Obviously, they blew that lead against the Chiefs, and I guess nobody got over it. But he lost to your Chiefs, who are undefeated. He lost to the Ravens, who have only lost to the Chiefs. And he lost to the Steelers, who are undefeated. So are you firing this guy because he lost to the Vikings? And then what's your other option here? You're going to bring in Romeo Crennel, who lost his defensive coordinator job? So I don't, you know me, I don't like halfway measures. Like, if you're going to go with Bill O'Brien, see it through. You know the schedule gets easier. It's not like Kevin Wilde's the only one that's got the schedule. Like, oh, look, we got the Jaguars coming up.
But the problem is this. You can't say, well, we played 3 really good AFC teams, that's why we started 0-3, when you have the most expensive roster in the NFL and you've traded your future draft capital so you can be one of those good teams. The Texans aren't supposed to be rebuilding. And with respect to what Brandon said, the GM stuff's been worse than the coach stuff, but it was Coach Bill O'Brien that called the fake punt in the playoff game. It was Coach Bill O'Brien that was up 24-0 in the second quarter and somehow trailed at halftime of the playoff game, Jenna. So I just happen to think he wasn't very good at both. That's fine. So they should have fired him earlier, but I would argue better late than never, Wildes.
Thanks for watching. Subscribe here to get the latest from the show. Also, be sure to check out more of the best clips from First Things First, or go watch a few segments from our other shows on FS1.